You know what time it is. Yes! Yes! Get into it. Get into it. Yes! We're back. Hi. All right, we are back with another installment of Storytime with Chris. As I always say, you don't have to watch these videos when they go live. You're more than welcome to watch them in your downtime, nap time, max relax and chillaxing time, in between time, mean time, scheme time, study time, break time, CP time, any time that you want to hear a highly animated voice bring you wonderful stories of magic, fantasy, science fiction, adventure, and music, and many, many more in between. Hi. We are back. We're back here. Gonna be breaking it down, oh darling. Gonna be breaking it down today. On my favorite day of the week. Boom, doo, 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 doo. On my favorite day of the week. Ba ba doo, 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 doo. All right. We are back. We are now in the final installment of the Dark is Rising sequence. We're about to start chapter 2, so sit back, relax, and enjoy yourself. Chapter 2, Black Mink. The way home was a winding way, first through fields and along tow paths to the place where they had left their bicycles, then along curving small green-shaded roads. Oak and sycamore and Lombardy poplar reached high on either side. Houses slept between hedges, fragrant with honeysuckle, and stared with invading bindweed. In the distance, they could hear the hum of a hurrying, more preoccupied world and see the cars flicking by on the motorway that straddled the valley of the Thames. It was late afternoon now. The horizons were lost in haze, and clouds of gnats danced in the warm air. They were circling along Huntercombe Lane, half a mile from home, past Will's favorite flint-walled, brick-trimmed cottages, when James braked suddenly. "What's up?" "Back tire. I thought it would last, but it keeps getting softer. I can pump it up enough to get home." Will and Stephen waited while he unhitched his pump. Faint voices drifted towards them from further up the road. The road crossed a small bridge up there over a stream that meandered through the farm fields on his way to join the Thames. Generally, the stream moved so sluggishly that it hardly deserved the name, though on just one wild day of his life, Will had seen it in spat. He scooted his bicycle idly up towards it. No sound of running water today. The stream glimmered shallow and still, scummed with green weed like a pond. Voices came nearer. Will leaned over the side of the little bridge. Below on the bank, a small boy came running, panting, with a shining leather music case that looked half as big as himself banging against his legs. 3 others were in pursuit of him, yelling and laughing. Will was about to turn away, thinking it a game, when the first boy, finding his way blocked by the side of the bridge, twisted, skidded, and then turned at a bay in a movement that somehow spoke not play, but desperation. He was dark-skinned, neatly dressed. The boys following him were white and scruffier. Will could hear them now. One was yelping like a hound. I'm just gonna say this. There's a term that is considered a derogatory term that I will say for right now because I don't find it to be too horrible, but we don't condone bullying over here. We don't condone xenophobia, homophobia, or harassment of any kind. But there's a reason why this story is written the way it is, and this is what I was keying on last time we were here. There's a very pivotal plot about to happen. It's a moment, and it's very relatable to what we deal with even today in America. So, it's... Packy, here boy, here Packy. They slid to a halt in front of the small, tense figure. Will recognized 2 of the boys who went to his own school, a tough, troublesome pair, much given to gang rumpus on the playground. One of them smiled, a tiny, thin, nasty smile at the boy that they had been chasing. "Don't want to say hello, Packy boy? What you scared of, eh? Where you been?" The boy jerked to one side and lunged, tried to slip past and away, but one of the others stepped swiftly sideways and blocked him. The music case fell to the ground, and as the small boy leaned to pick it up, a large, dirty foot came down on its handle. "Been to piano lessons, has he? Didn't know Packies played the piano, did you, Frankie? Only those funny little plinky-plink instruments. Whee!" He capered about, making sounds like a bad violinist. The others gurgled with unpleasant laughter, one of them picking up the music case and whacking it for applause. "Please give me back my case," said the small boy in a precise, unhappy little voice. The bigger boy held it high over the water of the stream. "Come and get it, Packy, come and get it!" Will shouted indignantly. "Give it back!" Their heads turned sharply, then the bully's face relaxed into a sneer as he recognized Will. "Mind your own mucking business, Stanton!" The other boys hooted derisively. "You brainless oinks," Will yelled. "Always pick your little kids. Give it back to him or what?" said the boy, and he looked at the smaller boy and smiled. He opened his hand and let the music case fall into the stream. His friends guffawed and cheered. The small boy burst into tears. Will, spluttering, thrust his bicycle aside, but before he could move further, a whirl of limbs shot past him, and Stephen's tall, rangy form was bounding down the slope. The boys scattered too late. In only a few paces, Stephen had grabbed the ringleader. Holding him by the shoulders, he said softly, "Get that case out of the water." Will watched motionless, caught by the controlled fury in the quiet voice, but the other boy was riding too high on his own confidence. He twisted in Stephen's grasp, snarling at him. "You crazy? Get myself all wet for some bleeding." I'm not gonna say that term. "That little cat food eater, you think I'm—" The last word had no chance. With a quick shift of grip, Stephen suddenly heaved the boy off his feet and into the air and dropped him into the scummy green water of the stream. Which goes to show racism is never okay, and you will be dealt with. You will be dealt with. The splash left a silence. A bird chirruped gaily overhead. The two boys on the bank stood motionless, staring at their leader as he slowly hoisted himself, dripping wet in muddy water, to stand knee-deep in the nearly stagnant stream. He looked at Stephen, his face empty of expression, then bent, picked up the flat leather music case and held it out, dripping at arm's length. Stephen handed it to the little boy, and he took it, dark eyes saucer wide, then turned and fled without a word. Stephen swung round and climbed back onto the road. As he stepped long-legged over the wire fence, the boy standing in the water came suddenly to life as if released from a spell. He splashed back to the banks, muttering. They heard a few scattered obscenities, then a furious shout. "You think you're so great just because you're bigger than me?" "The pot is speaking to the kettle," said Stephen peacefully, swinging his leg over his bicycle. The boy yelled, "If my dad ever catches you, you just wait!" Stephen paused, propelled himself to the edge of the bridge and leaned over. "Stephen Stanton, at the old vicarage," he said. "You tell your daddy can come and discuss you with me any time he likes." There was no answer. James came up at Will's side as they rode away. He was beaming. "Lovely," he said. "Beautiful." "Yes," Will said, pedaling. "But what?" "Oh, nothing." "That must have been little Manny's song," Mrs. Stanton said, digging a large knife into the treacle tart. "They live at the other end of the village, in one of the houses on that new estate." "I know them," Mary said. "Mr. Song wears a turban." "That's right, they are Pakistani as it happens. As it happens, they're Indian. Sikhs. Not that it's relevant. What horrible boys those three are." So they were not Pakistani. The young boy was not Pakistani. They assumed he was, when he actually, in fact, is Indian. "They're horrible to everyone, that lot," James said, hopefully watching the size of the piece of tart about to be cut for himself. "No relation to race, color, or creed. They'll bash anyone so long as he's smaller than them." "They seemed a little more selective today," Stephen said quietly. "I'm not sure you should have dropped him in the water, though," his mother said placidly. "Pass the custard round, Will." "Richie Moore called the little boy a cat food eater," Will said. Stephen said, "Pity that stream wasn't 10 feet deep," James said. "There's an extra piece of tart there, Mum." "For your father," Mrs. Stanton said. "Eyes off. He doesn't work late for you to pinch his dinner. Don't stuff, James. Even Mary's eating more slowly than you." Then she raised her head suddenly, listening. "What's that?" They had all heard the faint noise outside. It came again, louder. Distant squawking sounds rose from the chickens in their yard behind the house. Not ordinary squawks of protest or demand, but high cackles of alarm. Instantly, the children stampeded, James even forgetting his treacle tart. Will was first out of the back door, then instantly, abruptly, he stopped, so that Stephen and James blundered round and almost fell. They ran on, but Will could feel the sense of malevolence, of imminent, undiluted ill-wishing, so strong all around him that he could scarcely move. He stood, shaking, thrusting against the sensation as against a high wind. He stumbled on after the others. His mind felt thick and slow. He thought, I felt this before. But there was no time to remember. He heard shouting from the yard and scuffling feet through the cackling of the frightened birds. In the half-light of the hazy evening, he saw Stephen and James dodging to and fro as if chasing something. He thought he saw a small, twisting, dark body, lithe and swift, darting between them. Stephen grabbed for a stick, whacked at the shape, missed. The stick hit the ground, splittering. A garden fork stood against the fence of the hen run. Will seized it, moving closer. The animal ran past his feet. It made no sound. Get it, Will! Hit it! Feet flurried, birds squawked. The yard was full of colliding bodies, gray shapes in the dim light. For an instant, Will saw the full moon, an enormous yellow arc beginning to rise over the trees. Then James was bumping into him again. Over here! Catch him! Will had one quick, clear glimpse. It's another mink! Of course! Over here! Twisting in its urgent search for flight, the mink was suddenly between Will and the fence, cornered. White teeth flashed. It stood taut, staring and screaming. Suddenly, a high, angry screech that pierced Will's mind and brought flooding into it the overwhelming awareness of evil it had felt when stepping outside the door. He flinched. So a mink is a type of wildcat. It's more close to the ferret family. Like ferret, mongoose, badger family. And it is very light, so it's very slim, and it's all black, so it moves super quickly. There are gray minks, brown minks, black minks, but minks are just nature's local cats, is what I would like to say. Yeah, nature's local cat. Now, Will, now, hard! They were both yelling at him. Will swung the garden fork high. The mink stared at him and screamed again. Will looked at it. The dark is rising. Killing one of its creatures will not stop the dark from rising. He let the fork drop. James groaned loudly. Stephen leapt to Will's side. The mink, teeth bared, ran straight at Stephen as if to attack him. Will gasped in horror, but at the last minute the creature veered aside and darted between Stephen's legs. Even then, it did not run at once for freedom. It dived at a frightened huddle of chickens, seized one by the neck and bit hard at the back of its head, so that the bird went instantly limp. The mink let it drop and fled into the night. James was stamping in angry frustration. The dogs! Where are the dogs? A beam of light wavered outside the kitchen door. Barbara took them to Eton to be clipped, his mother's voice said. She's late because of picking up your father. Oh, I agree, said his mother mildly, but there it is. She came forward with the light. Let's look at the damage. The damage was considerable. When the boys had sorted noisy, hysterical pullets from their dead companions, they had 6 fat corpses lying in a row. Each bird had been killed by a vicious bite at the back of its head. Mary said, bewildered, but why so many? Why so many? It didn't even try to take a single one away. Mrs. Stanton shook her head in bafflement. A fox will kill one bird and run off with it quickly, which makes small sense, I must say. You sure this thing was a mink? I'm sure, James said. There was a piece in the paper. Besides, we saw one this afternoon by the river. Stephen said dryly, looks as though it just enjoyed killing our chickens. Will was standing a little way off, leaning against the wall of the barn. Killing for the love of it, he said. James snapped his fingers. That's what the paper said. Why, they were pests. It said the mink was the only animal beside the polecat that killed for the sake of killing. Not just when it was hungry. Mrs. Stanton picked up a pair of dangling dead chickens. Well, she said with brisk resignation, bring them in. We'll just have to make the best of it and hope the wretched animal didn't choose the best layers. And just let him try to come back. Steve, will you tuck up the rest of them? Sure, Stephen said. I'll help, said James. Wow, you were really lucky, Steve. I thought it was going to bite you. Wonder what stopped it. I taste bad. Stephen looked up at the sky. Look at the moon. We'll hardly need a torch at all. Come on, wood, nails, hammer. We'll make that hen run eternally mink-proof. Will said, it won't come back. He was looking at the pimpernel flower, dripping, wilted, and forgotten by Stephen's buttonhole. Good against venomous beasts. It won't come back. Oh, so the flower he was wearing from earlier protected him. Yes. Because he put it in his shirt. That's right. From the previous chapter. Oh, no. goodness, I done sprayed water. Gracious Lord, stay. James peered at him. You look funny. You okay? Of course I am, Will said, fighting the turmoil in his mind. Of course I am. Of course. His head was whirling. It was like giddiness, except that it seemed also to be destroying his sense of time, of what was now and what before or after. Had the mink gone, or were they still chasing it? Had it yet come at all? Were they shortly to be attacked? The hens to begin a dreadful, frightened clamor? Or was he somewhere else entirely? He shook his head abruptly. Not yet. Not yet. Dad's tool chest is in the barn now. He moved it, he said. Come on, then. Stephen led the way into the wooden outbuilding that was known more romantically than it deserved as the barn. Their house had once been a vicarage, never a farm, but the chickens and rabbits that their farm-bred mother kept were enough to change its mood. James snapped on the electric light, then paused, blinking, then collected hammers, pliers, stout nails, some chicken wire, and several pieces of leftover half-inch board. Just right, Stephen said. Dad made a new rabbit hutch last week. Those are the bits. Leave the light on. It'll shine out. A shaft of light from the dusky window beamed out into the night. They began cutting chicken wire and fitting together boards on the far side of the hen run, where the mink had wriggled its way in. We'll see if there's another piece of board in there about a foot longer than this one. Righto! Will crossed the moonlit yard towards the stream of yellow light reaching out from the barn. Behind him, the sound of Stephen's hammer rang rhythmically over the still restless murmur of the hens. And then the whirling took hold of his mind again and caught his senses into confusion, and the wind seemed to blow in his face. The hammering seemed to change to a hollow metallic sound as of iron striking iron. Staggering, Will leaned against the wall of the barn. The shaft of light was gone, and the moon. The alteration came with no more warning than that, a time slip so complete that in an instant he could see no trace of Stephen or James, nor any familiar thing or animal or tree. The night was darker than it had been. There was a creaking sound that he could not identify. He found he was standing against a wall still, but a wall of different texture. His fingers, which had been touching wood, discovered now large blocks of stone mortared together. The air was still warm of his own time. From the other side of the wall, he could hear voices, 2 men, and both voices were so familiar to Will out of the other side of his life that his family had never touched or seen, that the small hairs rose on the back of his neck and joy swelled in his chest like pain. Bad and then, a deep voice expressionless. It will have to be. Do you think you could drive them back? I don't know. Do you? The second voice was almost as deep, but lightened by a warmth of feeling like a profound amusement. Yes, you would drive them back, my lord, but it will not be forever. These men may be driven back, but the force of nature that they represent has never yet been driven back for long. The warm voice sighed. You are right. This island is doomed, unless... I know you are right, my lion. I have known it since I was a boy. Since the day... He stopped. There was a long pause. Do you know, then, I've never spoken of it to anyone? Well, of course you must know, he laughed softly. The sound held affection rather than amusement. Were you there, old one? You? I suppose you must have been. I was there. All the best men of Britain slaughtered, everyone. 300 leaders at the one gathering. 300! Stabbed, strangled, clubbed, and one sign. I even saw him give the sign. Do you know that? I, a boy of 7, all dead. My father amongst them. The blood flowed, and the grass was red, and the dark began its rising over Britain. He choked on the words. The deep voice said, grim and cold, It shall not rise forever. No, by heaven, it shall not, and he had collected himself again. And a few days from now, Baden shall know that. Mons Badonicus, Mons Felix. So let us hope. The gathering is begun, and men come from every corner of your loyal Britain, said the first, and this night the circle shall be summoned, the circle of the old ones to meet this great need. Will stood straight as if someone had called his name. He was so deep in this time now that he had no need of calling. There was no thought, even only awareness. He turned and saw light glimmering around the doorway in the stone wall, walked forward to the doorway, jumped suddenly at the sight of 2 figures, armed with sword and spear in front of him at either side of the door, but neither moved. They stood stiff, at attention, staring ahead. Will reached out to the heavy, thick woven curtain that hung over the entrance and pulled it aside. Bright light blazed into his eyes. He brought up his arm to cover them, blinking. Ah, Will. said the deeper voice. Come in, come in. Will stepped forward, opening his eyes. He stood there smiling at the tall robed figure with its fierce proud nose sprinkling shock of white hair. It was a long time since they met. Merriman, he said. They moved to one another and embraced. How do you do, old one? The tall man said. Well, I thank you. Old one to old one, said the other man softly. The first and oldest of them, and the last and youngest. And I too greet you, Will Stanton. Will looked at the clear blue eyes and the weather-brown face, the short gray beard, the hair still brown but streaked with gray. He went down on one knee and bent his head. My lord. The other bent forward in his creaking leather chair and touched Will's shoulder briefly in greeting. I am glad to see you. Rise now and join your master. This part of time is for you two alone, and there is much to do. He stood pushing a short cloak back over one shoulder and strode to the door, soft-sawed feet noiseless on the patterned mosaic floor. Though he was a head shorter of Merriman's great height, there was an authority in him that towered over any man. I will go and hear the new count of men, he said, turning at the door over the clatter and scrape of spears in the guards' present arms. And night and a day, be swift, my lion. Then he was gone, and as the swirl of the cloak had carried him, Will said, those guards didn't challenge me. They have been told to expect your coming, Merriman said. There was a wry smile on his bleak, bony face as he looked down at Will. Then suddenly he put his head back with a quick intake of breath and a sigh. Ah, Will, how is it with you in the second great rising? For this now here is the first, and I tell you it does not go well. I don't understand, you know, Will said. Do you not, old one? After all my teaching and the learning of the Book of Gramarye a while ago, do you still not understand how time must elude the consciousness of men? Perhaps you are still too close to men yourself. Well, he sat down abruptly on a log couch with curved arms. There was little furniture in the high square room. On its painted plaster walls, bright pictures of country summer glowed, sunshine and fields and harvest gold. Within the time of men, Will, he said, there are two great risings of the dark. One is in the time into which you were human-born. One is here and now, 15 centuries before that, when my Lord Arthur must win a victory that can last long enough to detach these invading ravagers from the dark that drives them on. You and I have a part to play in the defense against each of these two risings. In fact, the same part. But, Will said, Merriman raised one bristling white eyebrow, looking at him sideways. If you dare to ask me, how it is that someone from the future could take part in something that has, in the foolish phrase, already happened. Uh-oh. There we go. My hand was a little greasy. Oh no, Will said. I shan't. I remember something you said to me once a long time ago. He screwed up his face, groping in his memory for the right words. For all times coexist, you said, and the future can sometimes affect the past, even though the past is a road that leads to the future. A small smile of approval flickered in Merriman's grave face. And therefore now, the Circle of Light must be called by Will Stanton, the Sign Seeker, who once on a time achieved the joining of the 6 signs of the light into a circle. It must be called so that from the one and the same calling it may help the men of this world, both in the time of Arthur and in the time from which you come. So, Will said, I must take the signs from their refuge through that most complicated spell we laid on them after they had been joined. I only hope I can find the way. So do I, said Merriman a trifle grimly. But if you do not, the high magic which guards them will take them outside time, and the only advantage of the light holds in this great matter will be lost forever. Will swallowed, he said. I must do it from my own century, though. That was when they were joined and hidden. Of course, Merriman said, and that is why my Lord Arthur asked us to be swift. Go, Will, and do what you have to do. A night and a day, that is all the time we have, by the measure of the earth. He stood and crossed the floor in one swift movement and grasped Will's arms in the old Roman salute. So it would be, there it is, it's like this. They would, back in the day, when instead of, like, shaking hands or dapping somebody up, you grab somebody's forearm and shook their forearm. Well, it would, yeah, there we go. Nice to meet you. I shall be with you, but powerless. Take care, Merriman said. Yes, Will turned away to the door and pulled aside the curtain. Outside in the night there still faintly rang out the metallic hammering, the striking of iron upon iron.
Wayland Smith works long this day, said Merriman behind him softly, and not on shoes for horses in this time, for horses are not yet shod, on swords and axes and knives.
Will shivered and without a word went out into the black night. His head whirled, a wind blew into his face, and once more the moon was floating like a great pale orange before him in the sky, and in his arms was a wooden board, and the sound of hammering before him was that of a hammer driving nails into wood.
Ah, Stephen said, looking up. That looks perfect. Thanks.
Will came forward and gave him the board. And that is where we will end this afternoon. I hope you all have enjoyed this wonderful reading of Storytime. As always, I love you all so, so much on my favorite day of the week. I'll see you all next time. Bye, lovelies. See ya.